everybody, Miss Verano here. We're going to be talking about number 102 on page 27. It's an essential elements quiz, This Old Man. If you do not know this nursery rhyme song, This Old Man, I have a link, that is not my link, but a link in the description box below of this nursery rhyme song. Just so you're like, oh yeah, I've heard this song before. However, you don't need to know the words to this song, and that's okay. I've taught you how to read music after all, and that's all you need right now. For this particular exercise, I would practice number 98, the G major scale, first, so you get used to looking at the notes on your G. So it's kind of funny to look at them sometimes, especially when you're learning the notes on a new string. I would make sure for all of the instruments to make sure that you have a nice bow hold before you start, and I'll talk about each instrument's bow hold throughout the video, and that'll help you get a better tone and a good sound. The other thing is that on the metronome, I am practicing with 100 beats per minute. That's actually a little bit slower than a moderato tempo. Like the lowest possible moderato tempo is about 108 or so. But we're going a little bit slower because I know you're learning it and this is a practice track. So let's go ahead and get into it. Violins. Let's talk about your part. I would say the most difficult part for you is making sure that your fourth finger G's are in tune. When I go to play a fourth finger on my G, did you see as I was climbing my fingers up, my elbow had to come more and more in? That's because in order to stretch my pinky and get it on, I don't have tapes on this violin, but to get it where it needs to go, I have to bring my elbow in. So make sure you can swing your elbow back and forth and walk up to find that fourth finger first. You can even put it on the tapes. Even if you have tapes, don't just plop your fingers on. Walk your fingers up and try to get your elbow tucked under, and that'll help you with all of the notes on your G. The other thing which can be a little crazy is if you look at 3 measures from the end and you have that G, A, B, C, D, those have to be in tune. So your finger pattern is going to look like this. Your second and your third fingers are actually going to be together. And you've done that finger pattern on your D and A string before as well, but because they're eighth notes, it happens a little faster. You do end up on a fourth finger D on your G, so you have to do that same motion we just did. So practice that a few times as well with the G major scale. One last thing is make sure that you have a nice bow hold to get a good sound and that you're not playing it like this. You need to make sure your elbow is opening up. So it's almost like if your elbow was sitting like this and your violin was here on the string, it would make a square. You can check in a mirror when you're doing this. That's probably best. So make sure your thumb is bent. So if I put it like this, it actually looks like a little mountain here. So you have a little bent thumb. Once your thumb is bent, I like to put my ring finger right on the middle of the frog. So if you have a little dot, they call it the eye of the frog, you put your third finger there. These fingers kind of just drape over and then pinky on the top. And that way you have a nice bow hold. Okay, make sure your thumb is bent. Have that set up for success, and that'll help you get a really nice tone. This is number 102 on page 27, Essential Elements Quiz, This Old Man for the violin. 1, 2, ready, play. Violas, you have a similar thing as the violins. You have a fourth finger on your G, you actually have several of them, and you need to train your hand to do the same thing, but it's not going to be as crazy as violins where they have to come in. make sure you have a straight wrist, and make sure that your fourth finger is going to be on the tape. You might, depending on the size of your hand, have to, I'm going to stand this way so you can see my whole wrist and my elbow. You might have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you see with each climb of my finger, this had to come in? So if you set yourself up, if you do this, it actually, I think you can actually hurt yourself back here. So bring it in to help protect this part of your shoulder. You might feel the muscle back here strain a little bit, but it's because you're coming in. So you might feel it here, but you're doing that to protect this back here. Same thing as the violins. Make sure that in the 3 measures, the last 3 measures, when you have those 8th notes, G, A, B, C, D, that fourth finger gets in tune. I would practice that slowly away from the metronome first, and then you can build with the tempo. So like go up a little bit more, and then go up a little bit more, or a little faster, that's what I meant. And then that way you can build up to that fourth finger being in tune. As for your bow, you have the same exact bow hold as a violin. So make sure your thumb is bent. If you look at it at this angle, it looks like a little mountain, okay? If you are looking at it this way, if your thumb is bent, I like to put my ring finger right on the eye of the frog. So ring, drape these two, pinky on the top. And then if you hold your bow this way, it's a little less weighty. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this violas. This is number 102 on page 27, Essential Elements Quiz, This Old Man for the Viola. 1, 2, ready, play. Let's look at your part. Now luckily you don't have any weird fingerings or anything of that nature like the violins and violas do. However, your job right now is to make sure you can read the notes on your G in the music, and the other job you have is to make sure that your intonation is so good that the violins and violas can listen to what their fourth finger D is going to sound like. So you need to, if you don't set the rest of your notes up, it's not going to be correct. So they're actually depending on you to be in tune. No pressure. So I would really make sure that before you start, even though you're playing an open D, make sure that third finger is set up for success. Your elbow needs to be out a little bit so that you can keep this straight line of your hand. Okay, if you're doing this, that is no longer a straight line of your hand. Elbow needs to be out so you're keeping this part straight. That's what we mean by a straight wrist. That will help you get your fingers on the tape. Because if you're doing this, this is what your hand likes to do. And you kind of look like a sloth. Have you seen sloths and how they climb trees and their hands look like this with those big old claws, and they're like, ee, ee. No sloth hands in orchestra, even though they're like super cute, but no sloth hands. Keep this out. That'll help your fingers stay separated so that you can play your notes in tune. Let's talk about your bow hold. Your bow hold is going to be different. So if you're looking here, you still have the bent thumb. Do you see the mountain? Okay. You have a bent thumb. Your pinky is going to go on the outside. Your ring finger goes over, and then the other ones follow. So all of your fingers are kind of over. And your fingers are separated. It's if you were going to go, that's kind of like the shape of your hand, but your thumb is bent under. So if you do the thumb bent under, but then if you have a pinky cup, you can put that there. That's kind of what your hand is doing. So your hand is going to be a little bit more straight this way. Don't do this. Go out. Let's go ahead and start this. This is number 102 on page 27, Essential Elements Quiz, This Old Man for the cello. 1, 2, ready, play. Hi basses. Let's talk about your part really quickly. The beginning is very easy. You're going to be doing on your A and your E strings a second finger because you have a second finger C natural on your A string, and then on your E string you have a second finger G. But it's not terribly difficult, you just have to get used to using those two fingers. If anything, you can look at this in a positive light and think, I don't have to use my fourth finger as much, because your second finger is a little bit stronger. The other thing I want to remind you of is to make sure you're using a good bow hold. Just like the rest of the instruments, make sure your thumb is bent, it looks like a little mountain. And I'm using a pinky cup so I don't accidentally do a violin bow hold, but you have everything gripped over. There's space between each one of my fingers. If you looked at it from the side, it looks like that. Now I am using a French bow hold, but if you were doing a German bow hold, which I know a lot of you are, then you would do a German bow hold. All right, let's go ahead and get into this then. This is number 102 on page 27, Essential Elements Quiz, This Old Man, on the bass. 1, 2, ready, play. Helped all of you with this particular song. Let me know if you have any questions in Google Classroom. Thanks. Bye.